Oy vey. Yeah, so there we go. The best laid plans of mice and men. And your streaming software crashes. Yeah, I realize I'm sitting here and I'm talking and talking, and then I look over and it just says, "Oh, your stream is ended." I'm like, well, I didn't end the stream, and then I look over to OBS, which is the streaming software I'm using, and all of a sudden it's not working. So I'm back now. Yay! Hey there, back again. Yes, that's the first time that's happened. So I've been streaming for about a month now. It's the first time I've actually had the software crash on me. And it's possible because it keeps telling me that there's a new version, and I keep saying remind me later because I just don't feel like updating the software. So it may be doing that on purpose to be like, hey, upgrade your software, buddy. Um, let's go back overhead here. And then everything just dips out. Love it. So yeah, so what was I saying? I guess I was Inquisitive Axe says Trish on Trolls is where I died. Yeah, okay. Well, I think all I said was at the end was that these guys, and we can even go all the way to the back here, because one thing they used to do was they would actually publish who the sculptors were. So this was designed by Trish and Ali Morrison. So I'm assuming that Trish did the Wyvern and that Ali did the Rider. And I just happen to have that model sitting right here, waiting for me to paint it, saying, please, why are you not painting me? It's ORKTOBER. You should be painting orcs. I am painting orcs in ORKTOBER. Just not this one. Yeah, these are pretty fantastic models. And I like that they give you the exact size. Look at that. So this was the Orc Rock Lobber, designed by Kev Adams and Norman Swales. So Norman Swales was famous for doing, not famous, but he was known for doing war machines and things like that. So if you needed a trebuchet or a rock lobber or a catapult created, he was the guy to go to. He did a bunch of I think he did the chariots as well, the high elf chariots and stuff. But you can tell that these are classic Kev models, and mine are sitting in my case behind me here. Again, classic Kev Adams. I don't really want to talk about miniatures. Okay, so I was wrong. The trolls were actually Michael Perry. Interesting. And then the Savage Orcs were Alan. Interesting. Good things to know, eh? Good things to know. And then obviously all these Night Goblins and Goblins. I love the Snotlings. It says they're designed by Colin Dixon, and maybe he did these ones, but I have other ones that show all the other Snotlings. It just says designed by the Citadel Design Studio design team, because I have a feeling that there was probably a point in the design studio where everyone was just sculpting Snotlings because they were told to. They're like, oh, you got nothing to do? Sculpt a Snotling. Make a Snotling. Do something, right? And then they would just get added into the pile of Snotling masters that they would then cast. So I love, yeah, the wings, the old crusty metal wings. And I think this wing, I green stuffed it, and then it looks like it slipped a bit. I think what happened was that I was trying to figure out how to, like, what size of a piece of foam I needed to put it in. And I think I settled on like a 3-inch. And I may have had to have lowered this wing down a bit to get it to fit in. But anyways, so the design aesthetic, and again, let's talk about art, less about miniatures, but the design aesthetic for orcs changed, and that was because of the miniatures. So it was because Kev Adams exited, and I'm not really sure why he exited Games Workshop. I know that he was not, there was some, I don't know. I know that he was not happy with, he was not enthralled with doing the orc sculpts in the 1990s for Space Orcs, when they basically chopped their arms off and made them all like these orcs. So I mean, as awesome as these models are, I think he much preferred the idea of doing whole models, right? Entire models. I don't think he liked the idea of these models not having arms and being, sort of more. He preferred sculpting these kinds of orcs, right? Your classic old space orc guys, which you can watch me paint during the week, right here on the Eternal Chronicles. I'll be painting orcs until the end of the month. and probably in November as well. We'll be painting some orcs. So we'll see. So the design aesthetic changed, and here we have another Kev. This is oh my god, I'm really bad with names right now. Sorry, that's Adrian Smith. I have one of his art books over there, which on one of these Saturday shows we'll take a skim through it. I did pick a particular artist to skim through their art book today. We haven't gotten to it yet. We'll get to it. But so in 6th edition, which is this edition, the entire design of Warhammer changed. So the studio decided to take things in a more grimdark direction. If you look at the 5th edition books, they are bright, they are colorful. Not the army books, but like the rule book. It's full of color, bright colors. And here they're sort of going away from it. And so the instructions that they've given to the artists, and I believe this is Dave. Is this Dave Gallagher or is this could be, oh no, it could be Alex. I think this is actually Alex Boyd. So the instructions that was given was make them look more like the miniatures. So the orcs started getting these more like the lower jaw, the larger mouth. Essentially what kind of became Warcraft orcs. So it's interesting how those two sort of played off each other in that way. But definitely a more realistic approach to the artwork. And the big changes in terms of just the overall art direction of the game really contributed to this. But at the same time, they knew that they were keeping some legacy models, like the trolls were legacy models. So even though you have a newer artwork, and sort of this more newer, more realistic style, you still have a lot of artwork based on sort of the older models and stuff. And this is a great addition to the game. 6th edition is, for me, potentially the best version of Warhammer that ever existed. It exists somewhere between 6th and 7th edition. There were things in 7th edition that a lot of people don't like. I think it was unit strength and the horde rules and the stubborn rules kind of so it made cavalry irrelevant. And there's my boy Grimgor, who definitely exemplifies 6th edition because he was a brand new special character for 6th edition. And we got the pre-release model of him because I was working for the company. This is the second time I worked for Games Workshop was when this came out. And I was able to get my grubby little hands on the Grimgor model that we were given to paint for the store. And that Grimgor model exists today in my Orc and Goblin army because I took that model and painted him. So yeah, just some 6th edition, and it sort of stayed like that through 6th and 7th. When we get into 8th edition, obviously they're doing army books now in full color. They're doing army books now with hardcovers, and the layouts are quite fantastic. And you have a lot of same artist, Dave Gallagher, doing a lot of this internal work, like this sort of stuff. And this is when we look at this and then you go to something like the artwork in here, again, you have a massive shift in the artistic direction coming from on high. Obviously, there's not a lot of legacy miniatures in here, but the orc face, the orc body, the orc build that Games Workshop developed from the sort of the more gangly, skinny little orcs. I should have grabbed one of my like classic orcs. Well, here's a weird example for you. So this is an orc villager. So this is a female orc. So this is an orc mother, and she's got two little whelps here. So that's what baby orcs are called. They're called whelps. And so this idea of the orc gave way to something a little bit less cultural, like not really having culture, and just basically being orcs are, let's look at the orcs at war. How do they battle, right? And I mean, like the artwork in here. I'm glad I own this book. I didn't really play Mutt 8th edition. In fact, when I did play 8th edition, this book wasn't available. When this book came out, I don't think I played much 8th edition with this book. I played mostly 8th edition with my 7th edition Warhammer book, and I found that the army worked a lot better that way because I played a lot of 6th and 7th edition. But this book, I'm glad I own it because it's got a lot of really nice lore. The lore in it is very much, though, a state of the current time it's in. So a lot of this lore that's in here leads up to what would become the end times. It sort of tries to set the stage for it. And if you read through all of these 8th edition army books and read the lore in it, you can see the end times coming. You can see how they're talking about it in here. So when they went into 8th edition, I think they went into 8th edition knowing that would be the last edition of Warhammer proper. Because from what I understand, the design studio operates about 5 years out. So whatever is being released this weekend, and what's being released this weekend, I don't know. But whatever it was, they started working on it 5 years ago. Give or take. I mean, like, I'm sure that there's other things that fit in here and there. But from what I understand, the way that the studio worked was that when they from concept to merchandise on the shelf, 4 to 5 years. So imagine what's coming out in 5 years from now, because that's what they're sitting at Games Workshop in the design studio talking about right now. Well, not right now, because it's Saturday evening in the UK. But so yeah, so this is a great, and a lot of the older. So this is the 6th edition army book cover, and then we've got some great little bits of here's Grand the Paunch. And this is the 7th edition army book cover. And then we've got, so this is the Battle for Skull Pass box set, I want to say. Yeah. This is the 7th edition army box. So we've got dwarves versus night gobos. A representation which the models continue today. So in Age of Sigmar, the models that were created for this still exist within that today. Do you think orcs should have red eyes? My orcs have red eyes. Every orc I've ever painted has red eyes. So yes, they should have red eyes. They should be staring at you with their beady little glowy red eyes. Some great work here. Just fantastic artwork, and I love the layout of this book too. I love the use of colors in it. So I'm really glad I own this book, even if I didn't really care for 8th edition. There were changes to the rules that made me not care for 8th edition. And you can see the state of the models. And then the army list. So let's get out of that, and let's talk about space orcs, because that's what I'm painting right now. I'm painting space orcs. Your orcs have red eyes. Orcs with red eyes of the orc. You know what we'll do? Before we get to space orcs, we'll take a quick look through here, because these two books are only a few years apart in terms of release. Let's see if we can find the year of I'm pretty sure the year of publication for this. 2010. Okay, so I'm a bit off. 7 years apart. So this is 2010. And this is the Iron Jaws Battle Tome. So this is the first Battle Tome. They have a new one which combines them with the Savage Orcs, and it's called Auric War Clans, I think is what it's called. I don't know. I don't play Age of Sigmar anymore. I would. I'd play Age of Sigmar again. I'd have to get that new book, though. I think I have a digital version of it. Probably a digital version I paid for, too. Because I use the app. This... printed by Leo Paper in China. Do we have a year? We must. We must have a year. Why am I not seeing a year? See, this is the problem with Games Workshop books now. I don't get a list of the writers. I don't get... Oh, 2016. So 6 years apart. But there's no credits in here. I don't know who did any of this art. I don't know who wrote it. Yeah, there's literally there's no credits in this book. I don't know, if I worked on something like this, I'd kind of want some credit for it. So you can see that we are now getting into modern fantasy, for sure. One of the things I really like about this style of artwork is even though this came out in 2010, there's a timelessness to it. It's different than previous, right? It's different, but at the same time, there's a timelessness to it that I don't get in this. This feels like a product of its age. So this feels like a product of 2016. This is something that someone probably drew on a tablet and finished in Photoshop or Illustrator. And again, I couldn't do it, so I'm not deriding it. It's just not my style. It's not the kind of artwork I like. I like to see brushstrokes. I was talking with the guy who runs the Old Hammer original artwork, where he's actually selling old or original Warhammer artwork. I think he's selling Mark Gibbons stuff and Paul Bonner stuff. And, ooh, Paul Bonner. Remember that name. We'll get there. And this stuff, to me, it's soulless. And that's really the only way I can describe it. I understand what's going on. I can see the energy and the action coming out of the page. I just don't care. And is that because of the artificiality that I feel from it? Because again, I don't know. It very well could be that the guy who painted this image did it on a giant canvas and did it all by hand. I doubt it, but it's possible. When I look at it, it feels like commercial art. And I think that's key, because commercial art is it's commissioned for a very specific purpose. So it's a Zarfal Engel. It's cool to look at, but not to pore over. It's not inspiring to me. Exactly. It doesn't speak to you the way that, something like this would, or this beautiful Adrian Smith work would, or the Mark Gibbons stuff, or even going back, and we'll talk about artists who I feel deserve a lot of credit. And it's either Liam or Inquisitor Shavak who asked who deserves the most amount of credit for defining the orcs. And in terms of artwork, not in terms of miniature sculpting, but in terms of artwork, we're going to get to those guys, because when we get to space orcs, that's where we're really going to start. Again, I like this. Like, I don't like it, but when I see it, I get a sense for the action. It feels like a Warhammer picture, because Warhammer art is always very claustrophobic, right? Because Warhammer art is always trying to convey a quick framed snapshot of the chaos of war, right? The battlefield. So that's what we're getting here. So I get that from this, and I understand why this piece was chosen and why this piece was included in here, because there are merits to it, obviously. It's just, again, it's not my thing. As we go through and find more big pieces. And again, these are different artists, so I have a feeling that this piece, and I don't know because there's no credits, so I don't know. I feel like this piece, which almost feels like Dave Gallagher. Are they even allowed to sign their work? Can I look for a signature on here somewhere? Do they hide their signatures? Because that's what I would do. If I was an artist and I was doing something commercial like this, and I knew that I wasn't going to be credited for it, I'd hide my signature in it somewhere, right? But so that piece, this piece, and this piece, all feel like different artists, but at the same time, they're all using the same palette, and they're all taking the same artistic direction from whoever is the art director. Whoever's basically sitting saying, this is what we're trying, this is the emotion, the image, the themes that we're trying to get across. And obviously the reason that the palette is the same is because they're specifically choosing to base it off the Studio Army stuff. Who are these guys? The Sons of Iron, right? So they're all in these big yellow armor suits and stuff. And you get to these guys who got more reds on them, which is actually closer to what I did. Mine are red and black and somewhat. But anyways, so when I look through an Age of Sigmar book, and I don't own a lot of Age of Sigmar books, this is one of the few Age of Sigmar books I own, is this. I have digital copies of the other ones, because like I said, I used to use the Azure app on my iPad. So I would buy these digitally, and they'd be less, but then they would access and unlock all the rules within the app, so I could do that. I don't know what the new system for that's going to be. I know that 40K, there's been some mixed reviews on that 40K app, so we'll see. So that's Fantasy Orcs. So let's see, what are we going on in the chat here? So yeah, so Zarfal Angle said it's cool to look at, but not to pour. It's not inspiring to me. Exactly, and I don't know where that disconnect is coming from. I don't know if it's because the art is created digitally or just because it's not from our age. Like, you know, when I look at old fantasy artwork from the 70s and from the 80s and from the 90s, when I look at old fantasy artwork from those 3 decades, they tend to speak to me a lot more. And now, is it because I'm a product of those 3 decades? Probably. Right? We're all products of our time. It's like the music that came out in high school is all the best music ever, right? I mean, I don't necessarily think that's true, but like the music that came out when I was in high school, I have a connection to because of the time of my life when my musical tastes were developing. This was the music that influenced my musical tastes and my development of my musical tastes and continue to influence me to today. Same thing with artwork, right? So it's the same sort of thing. And red is Fasta. Red is Fasta. I think scientifically they've proven that red is good for at least 2 inches of extra movement over something that's not red. And then Liam, I'm finding the same thing with computer-generated miniatures. Lack of soul in the lack of soul of the older handmade stuff, even if they are amazing in lots of ways. Yeah, and I've talked about that on stream before. Digital sculpt versus hand sculpt. Up until last month when I started streaming and I was painting my Escher, up until that point, I was only painting 30-year-old metal models. I was painting tons of old fantasy orcs, tons of old fantasy elves, a bunch of old fantasy chaos stuff for fantasy, and then I started painting some space orc stuff, which you can see on my Monday to Friday show. Is generally me painting orcs at this point, and a few other things here and there that I'm going to get into. Yeah, check that boy out. But it was, and it's amazing to me how different it is to paint a metal model that someone sculpted by hand than it is to paint a plastic model that has been assembled from assets designed on a computer to all work together to fit onto a sprue frame to be mass produced, right? And then you build that out. And let's see if I can find a really good example of a digital sculpt that, of course, my thing up here is just filled with nothing but classic metal models, because right now I'm off that train. But if I drag out, okay, well, we'll drag out an Escher here. So this is one of the new Escher models that I painted recently, and I'll hold that up to the camera as best I can so you can get a focus on it. It's hard to... Anyways, regardless, she, you know, I don't take as much pleasure in painting these miniatures as I do, say, the classic metal alternatives of them. And I don't know why that is. I always joke that models that are sculpted digitally have no soul. And that's essentially it, is that they get soul by being hand sculpted. And you can, again, it's like seeing the brush strokes. I can see where Kev Adams went in with his sculpting tool, whatever he happened to use as a sculpting tool. I have dental tools, but I can't sculpt for shit. So, but like where I can see where he went in, and oh, someone's coming back. I can see where you went in and did these things.
You are not talking about elves.
I'm not talking about elves. I was talking about elves, but you missed it. I talked about elves for like 30 seconds. I talked about elves. And now I'm talking about orcs
30
again.
seconds?
Yeah, I gave those elves 30 seconds of my time, and then I moved back to orcs. Ow, that really hurts, sweetie. Can you say sorry?
Sorry.
Okay. You don't want to do that on... You want people to see you hitting me? Really? You want people to see you flicking me in the face?
Because you wouldn't talk about elves.
No, we're talking about orcs today. Maybe we'll talk about elves in a little while. You know what? In November, you and I can do a whole show together and we'll talk about elves.
No.
No?
I wanna do
And
a
you can
show.
show me all your painted elves. You can show everybody here all your elves that you've painted. Because you've painted quite a lot of elves, right? Yeah. Okay. You can't play with the microphone. Okay. How about this? How about you go and you give me 10 more minutes? And let me finish up here.
I have a lunch break.
Okay. I'm going to mute this. That button unmutes it. Okay. How about this?
I want to be on the show.
You want to be on my... Well, you're on the show. You're on right now. See? That's you.
No,
You're
my
totally
evil twin.
You're totally derailing the show.
That's the evil. That's my evil twin.
Don't touch the microphone.
That
please.
is my evil twin.
Because if you touch the microphone, they can hear it. It goes bump, bump, bump. It sounds terrible. They don't want to hear that.
Can I try it?
There you go. See how the levels jump? That's bad. That's called bad production quality.
Sorry.
All right. So what are we going to talk about now? Oh, warg orcs. Excuse me. Close the door, please, sweetie, behind you.
I'm not going.
Oh, I thought you were going. Guess not.
Elves.
No. We're talking about orcs. No elves. Orcs. Orcs.
Elves.
Orcs.
Elves.
Orcs.
Elves. Elves.
Do you want to see a picture of elves fighting orcs?
That's
Like from like Lord of the Rings?
I've seen that like 200 times.
Okay.
Oh, cute. Oh, cute.
Sweetie, please close the door.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Right. And we're back on track, kind of. Yeah, that's 8-year-olds, right? For sure. My daughter, she's 8, so yeah, that's exactly what it is. A show about elves will happen, and we'll do a show about elves maybe in December for Christmas, because Christmas elves, right? And I've got lust that I can talk about elves, especially about elf miniatures. Old elf miniatures, my favorite kind. So this is Warg the Orc. So this is my reproduction of Warg the Orcs. I don't actually own an original copy. This is a reproduction from a very high quality scans. And the one piece of artwork that I kind of just wanted to look at in here was this, because this is Dave Gallagher, who again, we dig all these out, did this cover, and he did this cover, and he did this. So he's actually been working for Games Workshop for quite a long time. So I just kind of wanted to show you this because this is some classic orc stuff. And this what makes this book amazing is that it's all lore. It's all lore and background. Oh, it's another Dave Gallagher. It is all lore and background. There is no rules in here at all. This is the first time Games Workshop had really done something like this, and they chose orcs to do it with because Nigel Stillman and Brian Ansell created what we call orky culture, and that's culture with a K, and wanted it documented. And so if you have Warg the Orcs, you have literally a tome of nothing but background and lore and short stories and factoids about squigs and things like that. The next book would be Here We Go, which is over there. I sort of didn't want to go through it, but I'll go through this one because this is going to lead us into what is going to be the climax of the show here. So orcs in 40K were basically like orcs and Panthers. When they first were presented, they were space raiders. They were little piratey war bands, and then as the game developed, they created the ORKTOBER as we discussed it, and the Warg book came out, and then the Here We Go book, which had even more lore, but it was also accompanied by army lists and rules and all that good stuff for essentially what's known as Warhammer 1.5, which is anything post battle manual. All right, so a lot of people don't know this, but Rogue Trader, the game, was around for 5 years, and there's quite a bit of books published for it in that time. At one point, they published a book called the Battle Manual, which essentially rewrote the rules, and the Vehicle Manual, which essentially rewrote the rules. So those two books, in the grand scheme of things, is technically a second edition. But it's a revision of the Rogue Trader core rules, which at that point, if you had those books, the Battle Manual and the Vehicle Manual, you didn't need the Rogue Trader rulebook to play Rogue Trader. So these lists, Here We Go, and Freebooters were written for 1.5. And there's a few pieces in here I want to get at. The very first being this amazing Adrian Smith piece, which to me exemplifies Orky culture. You've got your snake bites over here. You got your little snotlings. They were just running around doing their stepping and fetching. And you've got there's just so much going on in here. Little squigs everywhere. This guy's on a super cyborg. Not a cyborg, a super cyborg. Just really cool shit. And there's a Titan over here, like, attacking a wall. I love the juxtaposition of all these little orc trooper guys with their bolters, and then you've got two warlord titans and a reaver titan off in the distance, right, coming at him, and the orcs seem to be totally okay with that. So the next piece that I in here is this one. So this is another Adrian Smith, who I will credit greatly for. Sorry, Alex, I put post-it notes on your book. Shit. We'll get those off. They're just post-its. It's all good. It's all good. This is not my book. This belongs to Alex. He was kind enough to lend it to me because I don't actually have a digital reproduction of this, and I'm not going to make one today. So, I love this because I love this Orky pirate stuff. And you can see, again, so this is Adrian Smith, but if I look at some of the Paul Bonner work, and when we get to the Paul Bonner work, which is, he did all these little sketches and stuff, but his larger work, let's see if it's in here. That's Stephen Tappan, and see here, artist credits, Games Workshop. Is it so hard? Like, this is probably a 5 or 6 point font. Is it that hard to put the artist's name beside their work? I don't know. And maybe they can't do artist credits because maybe it wasn't the same artist that finished the work. Maybe one guy did the plotting, and another guy then scanned it and then went in with his tablet and did all the inking, like you would with like a comic book, right? You'd have one person doing the pencils and another person doing the inks, another person doing the coloring, and then finally another person doing the lettering, right? Maybe that's why the new stuff, because it's all just, maybe it's just AIs, and they just tell the AI, draw us an orc fighting a dwarf, and the AI creates a piece of artwork and spits it out in 30 seconds, and Games Workshop goes, publish that! I don't know. I have no idea who those artists are. I'm sure that they get credit somewhere. You could still credit them. Exactly, you could still credit them. And then here's an artist that I don't think gets enough sort of looks at, because he's done a bit of work. But this is Kevin Walker, and again, you have a unified design theme and style, right? You have the Games Workshop, the Citadel, Warhammer artwork, where everything is very claustrophobic and crowded, and everyone's looking off in various directions. Like, these guys are all looking at you, the viewer, but there's Space Marines over here to be fighting. And this guy, like, I don't know what he's shooting that gun at. I guess a Space Marine way over here somewhere, right? doesn't matter. That's like I said, it's that snapshot of the chaos of battle, and that's what you get from this. So, and again, and great stuff. And here's what's interesting. This book came out after Kev Adams had left the Citadel Design Studio, and I don't know why he left, but he stopped sculpting orcs at that point, and the orcs were actually handed off to the pair. I'm trying to think who did. We can go into the. Look at me digging through codexes, because this would be the next orc publication. So the next orc publication after this was this. So second edition orcs. So things changed quite a bit in here, and second edition had a completely different art direction than Rogue Trader. This was the dawn of commercial grimdark, right? Whereas this, you were still producing stuff. I mean, obviously, you're producing stuff as a marketing tool, because that's the reason that companies commission artwork for their intellectual property is as a marketing tool. But there seems to be a real there's a change in the ethos that happens around this time, in between these times. So this book, I want to say, is published 91. It might have been 90. So this is 1991, because this was the last of the 3 Rogue Trader orc books. So that's 91, and this one is 93. Maybe 94. 1994. And I want to say spring 94. Just because I want to say spring 94. Is this. So 3 years difference, and things get quite different. When you get back here, you have now Alan Perry doing most of the sculpting, and what you'll notice is that the stuff that Kev Adams did, he no longer is credited for. So here it says, designed by Norman Swales and Alan Perry. These Goth Knobs and Scarboys over here are clearly Kev Adams sculpts, but there's no credit for the man down here at all, because he no longer works for the studio. So I think that there was, and again, same thing here, Zogrod and Gazkul. Got my Gazkul right here. It's not quite finished yet, but I'm still working on them. And I've got Makari as well. Somewhere in there. But again, not credited. Alan Perry credited with the Storm Boys and the Commandos. And then the same thing with the Gretchen. All these Gretchen are Kev Adams Gretchen, not credited. The plastic Orc and Goblins, Orc and Gretchen for the second edition box set that came with a whole bunch of these, and then you got 10 Space Marines. Again, not credited. So there's a story there. One day we'll find out that story. So that's where we go with Space Orcs. Now, when Space Orcs really changed, and I was going to go downstairs and dig up my third and fourth edition Space Orc Codex, but I decided instead I would just break out Inquis Exterminatus, because there's this way I don't have to go down to my storage locker and dig through boxes looking for old codexes. So here we get to the Enemy Without, which is some ASMR for you, if you heard that. And on the very next page, we get into some orcs. So here we go. So this is an Adrian Smith. This is I don't know who this is. It looks like John Blanche. I'm gonna say it's John Blanche, but you can see now we're getting into what I like to call peak grimdark or commercial grimdark, like when they're really like orcs are no longer funny, right? Freebooter orcs, there's some comedy there. There's some humor, some gallows dark humor to them. They dress like pirates. They have these ridiculous ideas of orc culture and stuff. That kind of goes away when you get into third edition in a big way. And even the design style, the choices of how they present the work changes. And again, that's just the only good orc is a dead orc. Who would say such a thing? And I feel like this picture in the back is from Gorka Morka. And in fact, I think the picture over here, I think this is Gorka Morka as well. And then here we have the commandos, and some grots. And again, you're getting very different versions of orcs. Versions that I still love. I mean, I love those, the idea, I love those Brian Nelson, and that sort of what he helped do to the orc aesthetic. I miss and lament the loss of, like, what if they had kept this version of orcs and moved it forward into the newer, more serious 40K, which was 3rd edition, because 3rd edition was a serious version of the game. It was the Andy Chambers 40K, which we then got for 4 whole editions of that core system. We got 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition, 6th edition, and 7th edition. 5. And then 8th edition rewrote the game again, much like 3rd edition had rewritten the game. And 8th edition actually went back to 2nd edition for a lot of its mechanics and stuff, but that's a discussion for another time. So again, different way of presenting the orcs, and new artists, younger artists, different artists, but again, you have, and it's not bad and it's not good. It definitely, this is the era of they changed the way that a lot of stuff worked in 3rd edition, in terms of orcs no longer had bolters, they had shootas. They had different weapons and things like that. Just totally different design ideology for fantasy orcs, and science fiction orcs, going sort of, so when Games Workshop, I'm losing the train of my thought here, when they went from 2nd to 3rd edition, and they wanted to make 3rd edition more of a serious war game and more grimdark. Like they 3rd edition is where they take the grimdark dial and really, really start turning it up, because I think that they realized what they are at that point, right? Like, it's like at some point during The Simpsons, 30 years that The Simpsons have been on, it stopped being satire of pop culture and just became pop culture, right? So it's the same thing with grimdark. 40K, the idea stopped being satire and mimicry of science fiction tropes and became its own trope. So grimdark stopped being this tongue-in-cheek, everything is awful and terrible, but as long as you get the joke, you get the joke, and became, what else? So there's one more book I really want to go through here, but there's one I want to go through quick, and it's sort of an addendum. Because here we have, this is what happens when you give a company like Electronic Arts, with their vast, massive amount of resources and money compared to Games Workshop, and let them, give them the Warhammer IP and have them make a video game out of it, right? So this is the concept art book for the Art of Warhammer Online, and I did play a little bit of Warhammer Online, because it was Warhammer. It was cool. I could be an orc, so who wouldn't want to play that? And we'll go straight to the greenskins in here. So a lot of these artists are not necessarily fantasy artists, not necessarily fantasy artists in the vein of someone who would do work for Games Workshop. These are artists commissioned by video game design studios. So you're dealing with a different philosophy for the art direction, probably. And you'll see, I think one of the things that they really wanted to do with the orcs, because they were basically, this was supposed to be a WoW killer, right? Was that they had to make things different enough from World of Warcraft so as not to draw comparisons, right? Which is ironic, because World of Warcraft, everybody accuses Warcraft of stealing heavily from Games Workshop. Games Workshop went out of their way to make sure that the stuff that they did, because this is a fantastic book, by the way. Just for the, yeah, we're talking. Because what it is that it's the idea of, let's take the imagery of Warhammer and give it to a company like Electronic Arts, who has probably a massive staff of artists on retainer or whatever, to produce this sort of concept stuff. And so there's things in it that are very similar to what we would get in Warhammer, but at the same time, they've done things that they can do here that you can't do in the medium of miniatures and war games and stuff. And this is where we really start to see things like, look at these Orky weapons, right? You didn't really see this sort of stuff too much on the miniature side of things. Only start creeping up, and I have this model too somewhere. Only starting to really creep up in, I think that this stuff had a huge influence on this stuff, right? Even though this book, I think this book's 2005 or 2007. When did that game come out? Look at forward by Alan Merritt. Interesting. I don't think I've read that forward. I should read that. It'll probably be in the back though, the imprint. But the 2008. So, 2 years away from this. So this would come out 2 years later. And 8 years away from that. So, but you can see how this stuff strongly influenced the direction that the orcs would go, miniature-wise, in a big way. So it's possible that, obviously, these guys would have had access to material that Games Workshop had not published. Remember we talked about that 5-year lead? Right. So this stuff clearly was influenced by Games Workshop because that's what the IP is, but this stuff also probably then echoed back towards the Games Workshop, the Citadel Design Studio, where they started, because I have this shield. Like, I have a plastic version of this shield. I think you can get it on the Bone Splitter, so Savage Orc sprues, right? And like shields like this on like the plastic Boar Boys, and this is, how the new plastic Black Orcs would look, but they're based on the old metal Black Orcs, which predate this book by 9 years, right? Squigs. You look at this squig, there's a Forge World squig that looks almost identical to this. This is great stuff. If you can get your hands on one of these books, I bought this secondhand at a secondhand bookstore for like $20. I got this and the comic book together. Because I didn't buy Warhammer Online until it was basically free on the internet. So I never bought the game, but still managed to acquire all the stuff from the limited collector's edition at some point. The 2 big books and the miniature, all from different people, all from different times, but had to get them. So, and one of the things I will say about this game, if we got anything out of Warhammer Age of Reckoning, it's that we got like a fully mapped and realized Warhammer world. You can walk, if you're playing the game, you can walk from one end of the old world to the other, and a lot of like through the Empire and stuff, and into the Badlands, and up into the Chaos Wastes and all that good stuff. So I got one more book we're gonna look at here, and then we're gonna call it a day. So this is the Art of Paul Bonner. So when we're talking about people who probably had a massive, massive influence on what modern fantasy orcs look like, Paul Bonner's name has to be at the top of that list. Paul Bonner, Kev Adams, Wayne England, Brian Nelson to some extent, for sure. And then, yeah, so like all this stuff that... So this is a fantastic book, and there's 2 sections in here I want to quickly touch on. And I want to touch on the back one first, because that's where we get into what Paul did for Games Workshop. So this is, I think, in reading this, I'm pretty sure that this, and you can see all these little guys here, this is actually stuff that he did for the Here We Go and the Warg the Orcs, so the Space Orc books. I think in here he says that this is the first piece of artwork that Games Workshop ever commissioned him to make. And I think it was for a Well, let's see if it says what it was here for. No, I'd have to look in the back. But I think it was for a Warhammer Fantasy roleplay book. I know. So, and this is possibly my favorite piece of his work, which is the Freebooters, which is the cover to Freebooters. And I'm going to show you something because I noticed this last night when I was flipping through these books looking for inspiration for today's show. So this is The Art of Paul Bonner. Fantastic art book. I think you can get it on Amazon for about $60. I would highly recommend it if you're a fan of the man's work. But look at the color difference between this and this. So I don't know if this is deliberate. I don't know if this is just aged because this copy is 30-something years old. 30 years old. 29 years old. 1991. But boy, is the color different here. There's so much more blue over here than here. Here it really feels like the printer may have been told to pull out the greens more because orcs are green, and then that sort of darkened the rest of it. And again, it's you're dealing with also 30-year-old printing technology, so this was all done offset. There's no such thing as digital printing back then. But if you look at the original, well, you look at my copy of it, and I've seen photographs of the original, because you can buy it. I think it'll probably cost you over $10,000, but I think you can buy this piece. Don't quote me on that. This one may not actually be for sale. There's other work of his from the time that is, but I just love this with the lightning and this is, to me, this is what I wish orcs had been. And you can see like a lot of the design aesthetics that made it into those 3rd edition orcs are there, but you're missing the character in the face. I like the elongated jaws. I don't like the more like gorilla jaw that Brian Nelson gave them, and then just became this like ubiquitous thing that all orcs that were then sculpted after and since all have that same basic skull structure, right? Humans don't have the same basic skull structure. So why would orcs, right? You should have orcs with longer faces and some with like pig-ear snouts and some with large tusked jaws and some with no teeth at all, or whatever. So we're gonna flip through this stuff. So here we are, Freebooters 1990. So he painted in 1991. That book was published, or he painted in 1990. The book was published in 91. We've got another one. This says this is from Wog the Orcs. So this is from, it's in here somewhere. And that's a Wayne England cover, by the way, who's another guy who I think, I'm going to have to track down a Wayne England art book. Rest in peace, sir. Because he's definitely had an impact. And then this piece, this says, with apologies... This is Wolf Rider, so this is Wolf Riders. This just says, with apologies to Axeli Gallon Kalea. So I don't even know what this would be from. If this is... That looks... Oh, that's a slan. Oh, so this might be... and there's a slan. So that's... They're all puns. They're all puns. What was the name of that supplement? Not the Magnificent Sven. Oh, no, it was the Magnificent Sven. That's what this is, the Magnificent Sven. And then we've got some of the black and white stuff that he did. Yeah, that's fine. And again, Orky culture. This is what I wish that they had just carried forward into future version of Warhammer. And you can see, like, when they went back now with the new edition, they brought the clans back in some ways. I will go and dig up my 3rd edition Orc Codex and the Codex for Armageddon, which was the campaign, which introduced a lot of orc stuff as well, and new miniatures, and what orcs became in that version of 40K. I built an orc army for that version of 40K, and I no longer own that orc army, probably because they don't really speak to me the way that this older stuff does. Just absolutely phenomenal work here, and it doesn't do it justice when you go and you look and you see what's going on here. Like here we've got some goth boys who look like they're marching in. This guy's on a camel of some kind, and he's a snake bite, so he believes in the old ways are best. And this guy with this pipe, he's obviously a very well-regarded runt herder, I would think. And we got some snake bites, and this guy's on a litter up here, and he's got a little grot like fanning him, like just you within the internal logic of Rogue Trader. This all makes so much sense, right? That this is the way that the orcs would live on whatever planet they happen to find themselves on. And I love this architecture in the back here, because it's clearly that the orcs didn't build this. This is some human settlement that the orcs have just come into, and these are all blood axes. These are my boys, the blood axes. So Paul, you can't see it here, but he signed this as this orc's tattoo. So this orc's tattoo says Paul Bonner. Fantastic stuff. And look at these orcs poking each other in the eye. Like there was just such a humor and a comedy to it that it was so tongue-in-cheek. How can you not love this stuff, right? I love the little bubble, like a World War II bomber on the front of this thing. And then you got a big orc up in power armor. This is a very rich orc, because these are the bad moons, so of course they're rich. They got all the muns, they got all the teeth. And some more orcs. And some more orcs. And then by far my favorite piece of his, and I know that this piece is for sale. And if I had 6,500 British pounds just lying around, I would buy this. But I don't have 6,500 British pounds lying around, so I can't buy this. But I would love to own this. This is it's a small thing, but one of my most favorite things about this particular piece, is this lead freebooter is literally escaping the borders of the picture. And it just adds such a dynamic sense of movement. And you feel the way that this rope goes up and then curls over, and like this is a boarding action. This is how orc freebooters would get from one spaceship to another, is with some swing on some ropes. Just like the olden days. And you got an orc up here with a grapple and a bunch of these guys. And they're all getting ready to come. But these guys are on their way. And this guy, there's so much action and movement in this that he has escaped the borders of the picture. Fantastic. Love it. And then here, he just sort of talks about the design direction that he was receiving in making a lot of this stuff. And then here we have some Eldar. So we've got the old Falcon grav tanks and the Phantom Titan and stuff. Yeah. My computer is yelling at me because I've been doing this for now. Well, the other one was almost an hour, so we're almost at 2 hours now. And here we have the shock attack gun, and I love the little ramp that they've built for all the grots to march up as they basically march into the shock attack gun. Because if you read the lore for the shock attack gun, the new one, he's got like a vacuum where he sucks them up and basically shoots them out. In the old version, he opened 2 portals. So he'd open a portal right in front of him with this, and then another portal would open up somewhere, and he'd send one grot through, and that one grot would be holding a little red flag. So a little grot would run through, closing his eyes, so he doesn't want to see what he's running through because he's running through the warp, emerges out the other side, and if his brain is still, intact, he swings his little flag around, and then this guy can then, essentially zero in on his target, and then they send all the other snotlings through, right? So that's what this is depicting, and it's absolutely fantastic, because I love the look on this, who I assume is a mech boy, and he's just so proud at what he's done. And you've got the runt herder up here who's yelling at this mech boy, right? Like, hey, I got the runts are coming. And you got another runt herder back here, pushing them forward. So this is how I see orcs going to war, which is why I'm painting an orc army for this right now. Because to me, these are space orcs, right? And here's a sad one. Oh, this one makes me sad, a little sad, because these dogs can't figure out what they're gonna do, or maybe they can, and all the grots are just standing around, just waiting to do their thing. So you can see my enthusiasm for Paul Bonner's orc artwork, and it goes all the way back. My enthusiasm for Paul Bonner's orc artwork Goes all the way back to these, because he did all of these as well. All these little sketches for the army book. So you got your air boys, your biggins, your trolls and whatnot. So he did all of these little sketches. Good stuff, Paul. I wish I could afford to buy your work, because I absolutely would love to have some of it hang on my wall. Maybe I'll get a print one day. So if you can't afford original artwork, spend money on a good print, right? Because a good print, it's not the original. It's never going to really get more valuable than it is, but it'll give you as close to the feel of being in the presence of the original as possible. So that's Warhammer. This is interesting stuff, because this also says Warhammer stuff too, but this is, I feel like none of this was ever published. But anyways, so the last thing I'm going to show you, and it's just as a result of something else that Paul Bonner did a lot of, was work for Rackham. And in the mid-aughts, so like 2002, 2003, I had nothing to do with Games Workshop because I was busy painting confrontation models. So I just wanted to take a quick flip through here because I love his work that he did for Rackham is really evocative of the Rackham look, the confrontation style. And a lot of the miniatures, like the miniature for these Daibakimonos, are based very heavily on Paul Bonner's work. And this is a really famous one, so famous that they put it on the cover of the book. And there's actually a miniature. Someone, they commissioned a sculptor to sculpt a miniature of this exact Minotaur and then created the background. So you can get this whole thing. And then I saw someone paint it in this style and match this. And when you look at it from the perfect angle, it's almost indistinguishable, the miniature, the little diorama, from this work. So, good stuff. But his orcs, and I have this model too, he's actually in my Frostgrave warband. It was the Orc Treasure Hunter. Oh, and here we go again. It was a good thing we're finishing up here. How you doing? What do you got there?
Ice cream.
Ice cream? Where's my ice cream?
You can't have it.
I can't have ice cream. Oh well. I hope you're enjoying your ice cream. We're just looking at these. What do you think of this? You know what that is?
A weird purple guy?
That is a Tiger of Durs.
Bye.
Bye. Close the door, please, behind you. Got some Wolfen. I don't know why. I just wanted to look at the Rackham stuff because it's interesting for me to have known Paul Bonner through his work in the late 80s and early 90s, and then to come back and look at Paul Bonner's work. This is obviously from the early 2000s, but how much his style has changed, but also how distinct it is. And I think that's the key to an artist that should be appreciated in their time, right? Is how distinct their work is. Someone like John Blanche, very distinct work. Paul Bonner, very it's hard to look at this and think of any other artist that would paint something like that, right? And it's the same, and you can go back to the classic mid-century masters from last century, where you talk about guys like Frazetta and Arthur Rackham, and like they have this very distinct look to their artwork that is lost when you get to something like this, because none of this artwork is distinct. All this artwork, and I'm not trying to be cynical. I'm not trying to crap on this, because I understand it. I understand what they were going for. I understand the broad appeal that they're trying to create with this stuff. It just, if you showed me one artist out of here and showed me their portfolio, and I was able to go through their portfolio and look at sort of a vast range of their work, I would go, okay, well, now I can kind of see what their distinct style is. But then you're going to show me two artists from here and put their portfolios side by side, and then I'm going to go through them, and am I really going to be able to tell one from the other? I don't know. I haven't seen the portfolio, but in terms of the artwork in here, I can tell that it's possible that those three pictures, those three pieces that I chose in here, were all done by different artists. It's also entirely possible they were all done by the same artist. I don't don't know. I feel like the cold hand of consumerism sucks the life out of art. Is that something I can say? I don't know. I just said it. We'll see how that turns out, right? I love these guys. The dwarves who dug too deep, because this is literally what these guys are. They are the dwarves who dug too deep and essentially dug a hole into a demon dimension and just became possessed, and now they're totally messed up dwarves. But then you get some great pieces like that, and when I look at more modern Paul Bonner stuff, which we'll say this stuff from 2000 whatever, this is the Cadwallon stuff, so this would be 2004, 2000. I don't know when he painted it, but it would have been around then. His faces and his eyes, and there's just so much. There's a picture of a wolf in here, which actually frightens me, and I love this. So these are the Amok Slayers. So these are some orcs, and you can tell when you look at these models that were sculpted, that this artwork was based on. You can see Paul Bonner's influence on those in a huge way, and I think that if you want a more accurate representation of a Paul Bonner orc, you are better off going to Confrontation than you are going to Citadel. Mainly because, again, you have artists with distinct styles doing work on their own. So Kev Adams is off sculpting his orcs, right? Paul Bonner is drawing the artwork for what Kev Adams is sculpting, and the two share a lot of cues, but you have two very distinct artists doing the work, so of course they're going to come out differently, right? I don't know which came first here, the art or the miniatures, but either way, when you look at the Confrontation orcs, it's clear that Paul Bonner's style comes through in them, and I don't know who the sculptor is. We'll find that out one day. I'm starting to get a sore throat. This one, just the look in this guy's eyes makes this whole picture for me, is this face right here. This whole piece of artwork, to me, all that matters is this. And I'm not sure why, but I just love the expression. I love the fact that he's kind of like breaking the fourth wall, like he's staring right at you, and he's got these yellowy eyes with these tiny, tiny little pupils in them, so you feel like that predatory focus. I don't know. I'm just babbling now. This is what happens when I look at art. I tend to just like get these thoughts in my head about, what. I love this. I love these armor. And again, these are the mountain boys. I can't remember what they're called. Yeah. We understand. We're gonna fix that after. So that's. I think we're just gonna call that there. Oh, here we have some goblins. Speaking of pirates. Speaking of these guys. Great models. More good stuff. Griffins. I had a big griffin army. I had a ton of Confrontation stuff. And Mutant Chronicles stuff. Another time, we'll go through like this whole art book maybe. So that's that. So I don't know. I kind of babbled for about 2 hours about orcs, and I don't think I've explained what it is about orcs that I love so much. Why they have been sort of the ever-present, what do you call it? The ever-present aspect of my hobbying and my leisure time. But yeah, that's about it. So there's that Frazetta. So maybe we'll just end on that. Whoops. Whoa, there we go. Look at that. One day I'll be a professional YouTube streamer, and none of this will. I'll have a person who does this for me. I'll just be like, young Jamie, pull up, whatever. Pull up that Frazetta picture he did with those orcs, with those great contrasting shadows. Like I love this face because it's just completely in the. Sorry, I'm like with the cursor of my mouse, like you can see that, but like the face on. Now I'm pointing at it. So there's one orc there who you can't see his face; it's just all black and shadows. So you see his little eyes, and that's why orcs should have beady little glowing red eyes. So yeah, so I'm gonna call it there. That's the. I've been doing this for now. 2 hours roughly, Started around 11-ish. So, yeah. So that's the Saturday art show for this Saturday. That's the ORKTOBER Saturday art show. Next week we'll maybe do something Orktobery as well. Maybe we'll talk about goblins. I don't know, because that's a whole other thing about folklore. I mean, there's not the amount, the finite amount of references to orcs in mythology and folklore compared to the infinite references to goblins in folklore, because goblins are more associated with fairy folk and things like that, and goblins are what you warn your children about at night when you're trying to get them to sleep. So on that note, we'll call it there, and yeah. So until Monday, which I will be back on Monday, barring any insane construction going on outside. They're done with the tar. They're done with the sandblasting. What else could they possibly need to do, right? But you never know. So we'll see. But the plan is that I will be back here Monday at noon, and I will be painting orcs, because that's what we're doing in October. And until then, I will bid you adieu. I'll see you then. Same orc time, same orc channel. Or not the same orc time, because it'll be noon. I started today at noon. At 1. Fuck. See, this is why I got to end this now. I got to end it on a high note, guys, because I'm starting to lose my mind. So we'll see you on the flippity flop. Until then, I'm Christian from the Eternal Chronicles.